Hi, I'm Reva with Quality Sewing and Vacuum, and I have a question for you. What do you love about your serger? Well, I want to show you some of my favorite things about the Baby Lock Triumph. It's an amazing machine and it's so easy to use. So if you see a serger and it makes you hyperventilate and you get freaked out about all the threads, then I'm going to show you how easy it is. Now, first, let's talk about the threads. Now, there are 8 different spool holders on this machine. But please do not freak out. You're not necessarily going to use all 8 different spools. And let's see if you can take a look. We're going to take a look at this one right here. If you look, it's labeled and it says overlock needle 1. This one says upper looper. So each one of them is named and has a designation as to which needle it goes to. So these are simply placeholders so your thread is in the proper spot for the proper stitch that you want to make. And of course it comes with this really great diagram that shows you, it's called a quick reference guide, that shows you in a kind of in Cliff Notes exactly what you're going to want to do to set up your machine for whatever stitch you want it to do, whether it be creative, utilitarian, or decorative, whatever you want to do. So this is set up with a 5 thread right now. And let me run some fabric through so you can see exactly what a 5 thread is and what a serger does. So as we're sewing, notice that the machine cut off the extra fabric and it has both clean finished the edge and done the sewing stitch for us. So instead of making a seam on your sewing machine and then going back and zigzagging, it does it all at one time. And I wasn't even sewing at full speed. This little guy can cruise. So you're going to be able to get your projects done much faster. And you'll notice on the back side that the this is called a safety chain stitch. So this stitch right here actually is a reinforced stitch that has a chain stitch, and that is kind of like, the top of a dog food bag that you can pull one thread. If you get the right one, you can undo it. But it's a really nice stable stitch. This is the kind of stitch that you're going to find on your ready to wear fabric or garments, the things that you purchase in the store that are ready to go, whether it be your Levi's, your dress pants, your blouses or tops. If they're woven, that's the stitch that they use. Now let's talk about threading this machine. This machine is extremely easy to thread. And a lot of machines will have diagrams of how to thread inside the machine somewhere, but you really don't need that on this machine because it has a tubular threading system, which means that the thread gets delivered by air to the loopers. So there's no need to fish through and thread and do the loopers. So since you're right here with me, what I'm going to do is I'm going to start sewing this guy here. And then let's cut the upper looper. I'm just going to cut the thread right here. And now it won't stitch anymore. Well, it's going to keep going, but can you see it's lost its stitch right there because it doesn't have that upper looper. Now your upper looper and your lower looper kind of weave themselves around the edge of the fabric, which keeps it from fraying, and it gives you a cleaner finish and a longer life. So now we're going to rethread that machine, and all we need to do is tell it we want to thread. And this is our upper looper back here, and you're going to see, I'm going to turn the hand wheel, and did you see the little tunnel, the little tube closed? So if I open it, close it, open it, close it, we don't need to do that, but that was fun. So now I'm just going to take the end of the thread and pop it in the little hole that says U for upper and push the button, and it sucked it right through, and I didn't get it long enough, so I need a little bit more thread, and you're going to see it come out right here. There it goes. So easy. We didn't even have to take our project off of the machine, and I got to turn it back to serging there, and it's going to pick that thread up, and it starts sewing right away. So there's where we cut the thread and how far I sewed, and then here's where pick that thread right back up. So really super easy to thread. Yes, if this was a real project, I would have taken the fabric out and started back up farther, because we get questions about that all the time. But it's so easy. And the other thing about being able to thread it that way is that we didn't have to stop and rethread everything. Traditionally with a serger, you have to thread all the loopers and the needles in a certain order for them to be able to weave together and make a good stitch. They need to be done in a certain order because the loopers just can't grab the thread otherwise. This one you can thread in any order. If one breaks, it doesn't matter. You just pop it through and you're good to go. So really, really easy. So now let's take a look at how this behaves with knit fabric. So I'm going to go ahead and cut my my needle thread here, and I'm going to take that little needle out. There's actually a little little cubby over on the right side of the machine, and all you do is loosen a screw and this needle comes out. Now, a lot of sergers, you have to make sure you retighten this screw back up, because if you don't, they'll vibrate and fall out. But there is actually a little piece on the front of this that keeps those screws from falling out, which is really fabulous. Now, should you drop a needle down into the machine, it's okay, because there is a little magnetic plate that is designed to capture that needle that fell and hold it for you. So that's pretty cool. So I'll just put that back. Okay, now let's look at just working with knits. Knits are very, very stretchy fabrics, and so you're going to want to make sure that you work with a stitch that can stretch along with the fabric. So if you've ever put on a t-shirt and you hear threads popping, it's because it probably wasn't done with the right stitch. Look at all that stretch there. So if you were to sew on your sewing machine on a knit fabric with a straight stitch, it would go pop, pop. You'd lose all your seams and you wouldn't be wearing a shirt anymore. So this has a lot of stretch, but you can also do even greater stretch. So if we wanted to do a neckline, so I've shaped the other end of this guy to have a little bit of a curve, and we're going to apply some ribbing to it. And this does have a knee lift should you want to use that, which gives you a hands-free capability. Okay, we'll get it going. And then I'm just going to pull. So I just gave the ribbing a little bit of a tug, because you want ribbing to be tighter than you want the actual shirt. And then this has a lot of stretch, so you're going to be able to get this over your head many times, and it has a professional, clean finish to it. So that's really cool. Now, another thing that you can do is, well, you probably noticed one thing. Before I tell you about that, let's take a look at the machine itself. One thing about the Baby Lock Serger is that it's a superior sewing machine. And not sewing machine is in it's going to do buttonholes, a zigzag, decorative stitches, things like that. But it is a superior stitching machine. And one thing that makes that so is that there's no tension dials here. So you don't have to be confused about what tension setting to put it at. Inside here, there's a system that regulates the type of tension that's put on the thread automatically for you based on what stitch you've selected. And one way to do that is over here. There's this little guy here called the Stitch Selector, and this will change the type of tensions that you'll use. Okay, so that's really pretty cool. In fact, if we want to go down to let me see, I've got 4 threads. I'm going to take this down to a 3 thread, and we're going to do a rolled hem. A rolled hem is really a lovely, lovely thing. Let's get this. I'm going to cut this thread right here. Now, one thing to know is that you do not need to be, you don't have to be at all worried about what kind of stitch you want to do, because you're going to be able to switch out your machine very quickly and easily for whatever you want to do. You don't have to worry about getting it rethreaded and things like that. And we're going to actually thread it back up here in a second for our our safety chain, but I just want to show you the rolled hem. So I'm going to move my selector down to B, and then there is a stitch length on here, and I'm going to turn it to rolled because you have standard stitch length right here, and then we have rolled hem. So I want to make this a rolled hem. I want it to have a nice, beautiful, tight edge to it. So we're just going to run this through. Okay, so there's a nice clean finish, and it even can do an even tighter one than this as well if you should so choose. But now let's go ahead and we're going to put this kind of back the way it was, and it won't take very long to do that. So I'm going to pull my thread down, and we're going to put our little needle back in. I remember the first time that I used a baby lock serger, I was a little bit skeptical because I couldn't think of why on earth, what's so special about a baby lock serger? Yeah, it can thread itself, but what's so special about it? So when I first used it and I was able to go from stitch to stitch without having to really stress about it, it was like, okay, now I really get it. So we've talked about air threading over here, but this machine also has air threading of the needles, and let me tell you, those needle eyes seem to get smaller all the time. So I turned this to threading, but now I'm going to push this lever down, and this wonderful little contraption goes right to the needle eye, and I'm just going to trim off the top of that thread so it doesn't have a fuzzy. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to aim for where the eye of the needle goes, and I'm going to push this button right here. There it is now threaded. How simple was that? So very, very easy. And then we're going to do the same thing. I'm going to leave it in the threading setup here because I'm going to go ahead and grab our needle thread again that I had out here. Let me see. Chain looper. Raise this up, get him out. Okay, just like a sewing machine too, you're going to want to make sure that you thread it with the with your foot up, and this just winds around just like a sewing machine, and then there he is. He's ready to go. I just need to put that needle back in, and the one thing I need to do is loosen it up because I did tighten it a little bit when we were talking a moment ago, but not by much. Switching hands here because I'm actually left-handed. I was trying to do it right-handed, and I realized, that's not going to happen. So another thing that you'll notice about this machine is that the needles are straight up and down. They're not slanted. Most machines have slanted needles. They come towards you. So these being straight up and down actually will give you better needle piercing power. Now I'm going to move this over to the chain, which simply will give us, for the chain and cover hem, it's going to give us the capability of having the air flow to this side. Okay, I'll try my right hand. Okay, I'm going to aim for that where I know the eye is, push the button, and then up it goes, and it's threaded. So we're ready to go. Okay, so let's take a look at our what we're going to do next, and that is we're going to gather. Now, gathering is really, really simple to do. All you need to do is adjust your differential feed. So right now we're on neutral. That means it's going to be balanced. If we were to put it down, it's going to stretch the fabric, give you a lettuce edge. And if we put it up, it's going to feed the fabric in faster, so it's going to gather a bit. And it works really well also if you use a gathering foot, which we are not, but that's okay. We're going to just go ahead and go for it now and put our fabric underneath there, and we're going to start to sew. And I've got it gathering on there. Okay, now it's going to do a much greater gather if you use a gathering foot, but you can see how simple it was to gather and to attach a ruffle to a piece of fabric. So whether you're working on home deck, because remember, straight up and down needles mean more needle piercing power, so you can do those heavy fabrics. It can do clothing. You can quilt with it. A standard stitch is a 1/4 inch wide, and you have perfectly clean edges on your piecing. It's also great before you put your binding on, run your quilt through there so everything is nice and tight and compact and nice and clean and ready for that binding. But it's so fast and easy, and when you're making a garment or a project, you won't have to go to your machine twice and sew that seam multiple times to make sure it has that finished edge. You can do it all in one pass. So these are some of my favorite features, from the variable speed to the ease of having no tension settings and having it air thread both the needles and the loopers. It's a fabulous machine, and if you have loved the idea of a serger, you should take a look at some of the Baby Lock air threading sergers, because wow, they really make life amazing. They don't just air thread, they just make your life more simple and your sewing more enjoyable.